I am the director of the Essex Human Rights Centre, and it's a great pleasure to welcome all of you to this very special event. The Essex Human Rights Centre is a special place that has a more than 40-year track record working on cross-cutting human rights issues, bridging the divide between human rights education, research, and practice. Today's event is part of a new initiative, the Human Rights Through Art series, Conversations on Cinema, Justice, and Rights. This initiative stems from our understanding that sometimes the human dimension of rights gets lost in legal jargon and policy papers. This independent initiative uses the beauty and the power of cinema to recenter that humanity. The initiative uses film to spark deep conversations on human rights issues across disciplines. Through compelling movies and open dialogue, we'll look at complex human rights issues with fresh eyes. The initiative was developed by human rights professionals with a shared passion for human rights in the arts, with the support of the Human Rights Centre at the University of Essex. So in this respect, I'd like to mention my two partners in crime, who are the leaders behind this initiative. First, there's Daniela Barrow, who is a fellow of the Human Rights Centre and a human rights practitioner with vast experience working in conflict and post-conflict zones all around the world. She's an expert on children's rights, but that is just the start of her expertise. Second, there's Isabella Castro Giovanni. Isabella is a child rights and protection professional with more than 25 years of international experience, mainly with the UN, working across humanitarian, development, and conflict settings. The three of us have a long history of collaboration, having first worked together in Rwanda in the aftermath of the 1994 genocide. I'm delighted that we continue to collaborate so many years later. Without further ado, I'm going to turn now to Isabella, who will be leading us through this event. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Carla, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are joining us from. I'm really glad to be moderating today's event, and it's wonderful to see so many people connected already. Today is World Children's Day, and we decided to turn to cinema to shed light on a very critical child rights issue. The situation of children stranded in camps in Northeast Syria, and the experiences of those who have been repatriated to their countries of origin. At the center of our discussion today is the documentary Children of the Enemy by film director Gorki Glaser-Müller that we have the honor to have with us today. We will screen selected excerpts from the documentary and then hear from our distinguished panelists. We will open the floor for questions after the panel discussion, so please hold your questions until the Q&A session. You may post your questions in the Q&A in the Q&A. As a reminder, each speaker will have about 10 minutes for their intervention, so thanks everyone for helping us keeping us on track. I want also to mention that a link to the full documentary will be made available along with a temporary access password to all those who have registered. And we encourage you to watch the full documentary, which is really powerful, in the coming days while access is made available to you. Before we begin with our first short screening, I would like to invite Daniela to provide a brief overview of the humanitarian situation in Al-Hol camp and the key issues at stake. Daniela, over to you.
Thank you, Isabella. Can you hear me well? Okay, so I'll give just a 5-minute brief intro for those who are not very familiar with Al-Hol camp. So in March 2019, with the fall of the last stronghold of ISIS in Syria, in Baghouz, the women, wives, and female relatives and the children of ISIS fighters and alleged ISIS members were transferred to Al-Hol camp. This was done by the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is a coalition of armed groups and militias, Kurdish Syrian coalition, supported by the US. Now, some 2/3 of those in the camp are foreign nationals, primarily from Iraq, but also from over 60 other countries. And the reason of this is because, as you may recall, in 2014, according to certain reports, around 40,000 foreigners from different countries traveled to Iraq and Syria to support the so-called self-declared caliphate. Some children traveled primarily with their parents and adult caregivers who wanted to support the ISIS, but also a few teenagers, and many more were born between 2014 and 2019 in ISIS-controlled territories. In addition to Al-Hol camp, there's a smaller camp called Al-Rosh, which falls also under the administration of the Autonomous Administration for North and East Syria, which is a non-state actor, and it is secured by the Syrian Democratic Forces. In 2019, according to UN reports, there were around 73,000 people in the camp, in Al-Hol camp, of which 65% were children, and the majority, around 80%, were under 12 years old. Now, there have been a series of repatriations, but still, according to the Secretary General Annual Report on Children and Armed Conflict, still in 2024, there were 500,000 children in Al-Hol and Al-Rosh camps. And UNICEF published this year in July that there were around 17,000 children in Al-Hol camp. And it's important to notice that amongst these people in the camp, it's likely that thousands have been victims of trafficking, including Yazidi women and Yazidi boys and girls who were born of rape of Yazidi women, and many of whom were girls at the time. Now, the people in the camp cannot leave without an authorization from the security forces, which is granted quite rarely, for example, in medical emergencies. So also, no one in the camp has gone through a judicial review of their cases and have not had the opportunity to challenge the legality of their detention. As observed, I don't know if former Special Rapporteur on Counterterrorism and Human Rights is in the room, but as she said, Ms. Fionnuala Ni Aulain, Northeast Syria has become the largest site of detention of children for counterterrorist purposes worldwide. And I would like to specify that boys in particular who were encountered in military operations or in ISIS-controlled territories have been detained. According to a very good report from Amnesty International from last year, around 1,000 boys were held in detention facilities, mainly in adult male prisons. And some of them were young men who had been detained when they were children and have turned 18 during detention. In particular, adolescent boys, sometimes as young as 10, have been in many cases, forcibly separated from their mothers and transferred to two so-called rehabilitation centers where they are also deprived of their liberty there. Now, in terms of the humanitarian situation in the camp, in 2019, already the UN had recorded that around 390 children below 5 years of age had died of preventable causes like dehydration, malnutrition, or pneumonia. And still, children have been affected by lack of access to water, food, sanitation, proper access to proper medical care, and to education, to the point that the International Commission of Inquiry on Syria has concluded that the conditions in the camp amount to cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment for the women and children there. Also, children face protection risks, many, particularly boys, at risk of being recruited by sleeping ISIS cells. And also there's the risk of trafficking, sexual violence, and there has been violence in the camps, including murders of mothers, of women. And another protection issue is the lack of civil documentation, notably a lack of birth registration of children in the camps. As mentioned, the population has decreased. There has been repatriation to at least 38 countries, but I can't give the exact number because it's difficult to capture the exact number of repatriations for a number of reasons. One is that some of the people repatriate through different pathways, not the official state-sponsored repatriation missions. Also, some of the repatriations are done in a confidential manner, and also children are safeguarded from media coverage upon return. I think I stopped there. I had 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Daniela, for helping us contextualize the issue. So let us proceed with the first screening. It's just a short trailer, after which we will hear from the director.
Det är sista bilden jag har på Amanda. Jag har förlorat henne. Och barnen är ensamma, någonstans i norra Syrien.
There is the huge question of what to do with thousands of children born inside the caliphate.
Their own governments refuse to take them back.
Jag har kontaktat Röda Korset, Rädda Barnen och massa olika organisationer, men inte fått någon hjälp. Jag måste åka och hämta barnen. Hur kommer sig hon så snabbt radikaliserades? Varför tog hon den här vägen? Vad har man gjort för fel? Lo único que queda de Amanda, digamos, de su propia carne y sangre son mis nietos. Det handlar inte om bara 2 terrorister som åkte iväg, utan nu handlar det om 7 små oskyldiga barn. Så de här grejerna händer för att... Maybe some organization is take the children. Situationen är kaotisk. Mohammed is in the hospital. Alltså det här är helt sjukt. Jag måste agera. Oskyldiga barnens liv är i fara. Hallå?
Gorki, a very warm welcome, and thank you for taking the time for being with us. So Gorki Glaser-Müller is a freelance film director, screenwriter, and multimedia artist based in Sweden. He has a background as a professional actor and has been experimenting with storytelling in different forms, and Children of the Enemy is his documentary debut. Gorki, can you tell us what compelled you to make a movie about the situation of these children and how you navigated the unique challenges of documenting such a politically and emotionally charged subject? Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. And hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. And thank you for having this film and this topic on this special day. It all began by the call of a friend, that Patricio Galvez was a friend, not a near friend, but an acquaintance. And then he didn't want to explain in the phone this was a family secret, that his young daughter had joined ISIS several years ago, and it was definitely not known for anyone, not for me, that she was dead. So it was his urgency of trying to, since he couldn't save his daughter, he was so keen on trying to save his grandchildren. And it was very touching and moving. That was the spark to make the... It didn't begin as a film, it started as a documentation, because he was very clear on the premise that one or several of the children, one, they might not be alive, and two, that when if he would find them, in what state would they be, and they were really under the yeah, it was very severe situation they were. So I never made. This is my first documentary that I have made, and I never made a film that is so close to the words that we artists sometimes says very loosely, that make art as a matter of life and death, and this situation was very much like that. So that was I felt I needed to follow him and film him, and it became a film later. Of course, I am a filmmaker, and I wanted to make a film from the beginning, but there was no film. There was just a promise of a good story, and sometimes also a very sad and tragic story.
Thank you, Gorki. And if I may follow up, do you feel that centering the narrative on the human experience of these children has helped somehow shifting public opinion or the public discourse in your country around such a highly politicized topic?
Yes, the short answer is yes. It's actually helped, but I would like to say that what helped the most, it was the attention in the media that Patricio got, because the film, and I tried to explain to him that if I make a film from my perspective that is a highly artistic aim for what we do, is not journalism, it's not fast produced, it will not help you in the sense that you will not be able to make an impact, and what you need is to make an impact now. And people that he met and were very clear, among others, the attorney in England that helped him on his to start this journey, was very clear that he had to make noise because the children didn't have any voice. None of these children until now have a way of communicating with the outside world. It's always not even their parents, not even the so yeah. So I feel, of course, that we made a difference, and we are today, what we're doing today is a proof of that it has a repercussion. But I would like to say that it was Patricio Galvez' own work that draw the attention of the media, and the national response that came with the film was very big. The coverage, it was like a second round in this effort, in this fight for the children's right. And but I would like to say that Repatriate the Children's in Denmark, they were able to make an even bigger effort, because they also we had a premiere in Denmark, an international premiere in a very big festival, and one of the biggest newspapers wanted to have direct after the premiere, wanted to have an online. This was during Corona, so a lot of people attended that online discussion, and it was yeah, it made a bigger impact also. So a very big applause to Natasha and Knud, the attorney working there with the repatriated children.
Thank you very much, Gorki. And what you just said is a reminder of what Carla mentioned at the very beginning, that is the power of art to really put complex human rights, in this case, child rights issue.
Yeah, I would like to add that I see my 50 cent, my apport to this is that we, when we work as visualizers or artists we externalize, I would like to say, emotions that are more than information. In the beginning, Daniela, you mentioned a lot of facts that are important, and it's very necessary that people track this, document this. But where I step in is when there is, or maybe there is no documentation. Maybe you find one or two persons that are victims, so to say, and you need to document them. And it's important to be accurate to what they're feeling and what they're going through right at the moment. And that is the very core of this documentary, that I was able to be there following Patricia Galvez at every moment. So it's not a documentary that is staged afterwards when you can hear his voiceover. It was at any moment that call, the tragic call or the happy call could happen. So I recorded all his calls, for so to say, and all the events and all the turning points and all that.
Thank you very much. It is indeed a very powerful documentary, and I'm sure there will be questions for you later on. But thank you again for this critical work that you.
It's me that is thanking you guys for this work. Yes.
Let me invite now our next guest speaker, Professor Anne Skelton. Anne is Professor of Law at the University of Pretoria, former chair of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, or CRC Committee, and a prominent child rights lawyer and advocate. Anne, it's a great pleasure to have you with us, and thank you again for making the time. Here is my question to you. In 2022, the CRC committee concluded that France has the responsibility and power to protect the French children stranded in those camps in Northeast Syria against an imminent risk to their lives by repatriating them. Could you walk us through the legal and factual grounds for that decision, and what implications that decision may have for other children who are still stranded in those camps? Over to you.
Yes, Isabella, thank you for leading into that, and thank you too to Gorki for sharing with us. And it's interesting that the story about the case against France is also a story of grandparents looking for their children in the camps in Northeast Syria. The case was brought to the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child when I was still there, a member of the committee. And it was begun by a group of grandparents living in France whose grandchildren were in the camps in Northeast Syria. So just like the story of Beatrice, many of them had lost their daughters or their sons who had gone to Syria, and now some of them were dead, but actually most of the children involved in this case, their mothers were still alive, though their fathers had mostly died. And so the question was, why was France not bringing the children back? And the grandparents started by appealing to the state, writing to the president, and then they also noted that there'd been a court that had gone to the court, a case that had gone to the courts in France, and the court there had said, look, there's nothing these courts here in France can do because these children are not in France, they're somewhere else, and the courts in France can only make orders that can be executed or carried out in France. I won't say whether I think that's correct or not, but the point is that that meant that there was nothing more that the grandparents could pursue in France, and therefore they were able to come to the Committee on the Rights of the Child and say, can you help us with this case? So the committee obviously got evidence, were presented with evidence about the dreadful conditions, and indeed children were dying in those camps. This was quite evident, and some of them were suffering with illnesses and so on. And one could really get the impression that if they were not assisted and brought home, really their lives were in imminent danger. So it felt there was a lot of pressure, even though the United Nations processes take very long and are slow. But at the same time, there was a feeling that, look, we have to act as quickly as we can because these children could die. So the committee had to decide whether or not it could say to France, you must act to bring these children home, and that you are violating their rights if you do not do so. The rule in international law usually is that states are responsible only for the children within the jurisdiction, as lawyers say, But that jurisdiction usually coincides with the geographical boundaries of a state. And this is what the French government was saying. But these children aren't here anymore. We cannot be responsible for all French children everywhere. They didn't deny the children were French, but they nevertheless felt that they did not have a positive duty that they needed to go and act to bring these children back. So the committee looked at the situation and looked at the legal analysis of this question of jurisdiction and said, in situations like this, where children's lives are in imminent danger, and where we know that the French government can bring them back, because actually the French children had brought some orphan children back before. In such situations, there is an obligation on the French government to return them. And by not bringing them back, the French government is violating their rights. So the committee found that France was violating the rights of the children, and their right to life, their right to health, their right to development, and so on, and said, as a remedy for these violations, they must act to bring the children back to France. Subsequently, there has been another case about Finland as well, which was similar to this, which also the committee found a violation of the rights by Finland by not bringing the children back, and also requested Finland to bring children back. So those are the stories. And in all of these cases, it's usually grandparents or relatives who are fighting, just like Patricio, to get the children home.
Thank you so much, Anne, for the clarity and also for the passion that you bring to this work. There may be colleagues on this webinar who are child rights experts or members of the CRC committee. I believe there might be Benoit might be with us. And so there will be opportunities during the Q&A session to go a little bit deeper into this topic. And I also found, let me say, I also found very fascinating that it's grandparents who are fighting for these children. It's really very touching. So with that, let us move to the second screening. It's another very short clip that will give us a bit more food for thought as we continue our conversation.
Necesita de una persona que venga acá, lo que saque a los niños. Estamos hueando. Los locos no nos quieren darle permiso. Norra Syriens utrikesminister säger den svenska regeringen har inte kommit överens med oss. Pero si tú tienes, por ejemplo, un grupo de niños que tú sabes dónde están, estos niños están aquí, se están a punto de morir, hay que sacarlos. No podéis decir, no, tenés que esperarte que yo te arregle todos los otros casos para ayudarte, ¿cachai? La única gente que finalmente me empezó a ayudar, porque ya como que es como la única cosa que salvó fue la prensa.
Det är många på sociala medier som är väldigt kritiska och till och med hatiska mot dig nu när du försöker hitta dina barnbarn, och de anklagar dig för många olika saker, bland annat att redan ha uppfostrat en terrorist, att du inte är lämplig som förälder. Hur ser du på alla IS-offer idag? Både din dotter och din svärson var med bodde i detta kalifat där man begick de här övergreppen, och det finns väldigt många yazidiska unga kvinnor som har varit sexslavar. Jag vet inte om de var det hos Mikael, men de var det hos andra inom kalifatet. Hur ser du på alla offer?
Alltså jag lider tillsammans med dem. Det är självklart. Jag känner att någon dag skulle jag vilja, det har jag liksom sagt till kurder, att i min dotters namn så vill jag be en ursäkt för allt det här som har hänt liksom med, och självklart lider jag med alla dessa offer. Jag har känt deras, på något sätt, jag förstår deras lidande, jag förstår att allt det här har varit så hemskt.
Förstår du att det är många i Sverige till exempel som känner större sympati för jezidiska barn än de gör för dina barnbarn?
Ja, det är klart. Det är klart jag känner, jag förstår det. För att, jag menar, vi har jezidiska barn som är offer, som är oskyldiga barn. Och sen har vi runt omkring deras anhöriga eller familjer, pappa, mamma, som också är offer. Och sen har vi på den här andra sidan så har vi mina barnbarn som är där i cykel, som är också oskyldiga och är offer. Men föräldrarna, det är de som är skyldiga.
Hello everyone, nice to see you. How are you? How is it? Gorki. Hi again. Alla med? Alla sju? Alla sju? Alla, excuse me.
Är ni hungriga? Äntligen har vi alla 7 och vi är på väg till hotellet och de ska få lite mat först. De mår väldigt bra allihopa. De har klarat sig. Här har vi lilla Mohammed. Så har vi, här har vi Aisha. Och där har vi Mariam. Och där lite till då Mariam. Och där bakom, vad har vi där? Julius. Hej, hej. Ibrahim, kan du säga hej? Hej, hej. Oj, 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 oj. Och där har vi Sara. Sara, hej. Kan du vinka? Kan du vinka? Kan du säga hej? Och Sofia. Sofia, hej, hej. Säg det hej. Ja, underbart.
Nu har du ritat blomma, Ibrahim. Fint ritat. Ibrahim, kan du berätta för mig vad du har ritat här?
Helikopterritat.
Och vad är det andra? Och det andra som du har ritat, är en helikopter och vad mer?
These are planes. This is truck. And this I asked him this and he said sound.
Kom nu! Skynda dig nu!
Mikael Skråmos barn har nu kommit till Sverige. Det var efter morfar Patrice och Galves månadslånga kamp som de under onsdagen landade på Landvetter i Göteborg.
De 7 barnen som landade 9:56 i morse på Landvetter flygplats är att betrakta som vilka föräldralösa barn som helst. Det säger Göteborgs stad. Polisen har nu tagit familjen till Göteborgs stad och det är där Göteborgs socialtjänst nu kommer ta över hanteringen av de här 7 föräldralösa barnen.
Där är din mamma. Och där är jag. Oj, jag är jätteliten. Kolla, där är morfar. Ja, jag var jätteung. Nej, men ja. Kolla, jag släpper det bara.
Realmente espero que con el tiempo los niños sobrepasen toda esta historia y se sanen. Me preocupo mucho por los niños. A su debido tiempo tienen que saber por qué y cómo sus padres murieron. O sea, finalmente educar a estos niños va a ser una gran tarea, mucho más grande que el hecho de haberlos sacado de Siria.
Well, lots to reflect on. But let me now turn to our next guest speaker, Beatrice Eriksson. Beatrice is a social worker and co-founder of Repatriate the Children Sweden, an organization that aims to raise awareness and mobilize action on behalf of the children held in the camps in Northeast Syria. So thanks, Beatrice, for being with us and for the work that you do. So a twofold questions for you, Beatrice. First of all, what led you to establish this organization, and how the collaboration with Gorki on this documentary shape your experience on this topic and your commitment to this cause? And secondly, if you could share with us some insights on Sweden's current approach to the repatriation and reintegration of children from Northeast Syria. Over to you, Beatrice.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy and honored to be invited to this important webinar, especially on World Children's Day. And thanks also to my fellow distinguished presenters. So I'm Beatrice, a social worker, and together with Gorki Glaser-Müller and the grandfather Patricio Galvez, I founded the rights organization Repatriate the Children, RTC. And it was the three of us from Sweden that were present on the ground trying to get the 7 orphaned grandchildren of Patricio back home. But I want to say also that we got help from many other people, initiatives and stakeholders in Syria, in Iraq, and internationally. And RTC, Repatriate the Children, the non-governmental organization, it was founded as a response to the situation. Because what we saw back in 2019, after the fall of the so-called caliphate, with tens of thousands of children with origins from countries all across the globe, and these kids being detained in open-air prisons in the Syrian desert in a situation with lots of dangers of different kinds. I mean, it was, and it still is, a humanitarian catastrophe. And the whole management of this file is a massive failure from the international community side. Because instead of acting urgently to fulfill the rights of these children and acting for their immediate rescue and prevent new atrocities, these children have not only been neglected, but they have also been used as a tool in a politicized issue because of who they happen to be born to. And this is not in any way an acceptable way to treat children or any human being. So RTC came from that need to respond and to do something to address this injustice. I remember thinking, what is going on here? Why are these children not being rescued? They're suffering, they're dying actually, and these camps are like ISIS academies for kids, which is insane, but also very risky. The kids have the right to return, they can be returned. The local administration holding them there in Northeast Syria is appealing to the international community to bring them home. So how can this be? And when we finally got back to Sweden with the 7 orphans in May 2019, other family members from all of Sweden and many parts of the world actually reached out to us and asked, how did you get them home? Can you also help us? Our children and grandchildren are also stranded there. And this is before RTC existed. So my private cell phone became like a 24/7 hotline for families across the globe. And we began to organize, mobilize, and to support these families and to work on their cases and to advocate for the rights to be fulfilled and for them to be returned. Using art as a tool in this was very useful because this movie has drawn so much attention and it has been part of policy changing work. And for Patricio Galvez, as someone affected by this situation himself, he wanted there to be an organization that could support family members in similar situations that he had been in. So that is why we formed RTC as a response to a need. And soon thereafter, a sister branch of RTC opened in Denmark that we collaborate closely with. And after we got back to Sweden with the 7 orphans, it took Sweden almost 2.5 years before they resumed the repatriation efforts of Swedish children and mothers. And during 5 instances over the course of a year in 2021 and 2022, Sweden brought home almost all of the remaining Swedish families. In total, they assisted 18 Swedish families to get back home. There's still 1 Swedish family remaining, and we're still working on their case, trying to get them back as well. But the majority of the Swedes have been, children and mothers have been back home since a few years now. And I want to say something about the reception and what happened. When the families arrived back in Sweden, there was an organized reception where they were met at the airport by multiple authorities. And what happened was that children and mothers were separated from each other. The police took the mothers into custody for interrogation, while the children were taken into the care of the Child Protection Unit of Social Services, according to a law that can be applied to temporarily remove parental custody of a child. And even though the mothers in most cases were arrested only for a day or 2 before they were released, though in all but 1 case, they remained separated from their children for weeks, up to months, in a few cases even years, before they were reunited again. And these family separations led to dramatic scenes with children screaming and crying and panicking as they were separated from the mothers at the airport the moment they landed on Swedish ground. And let's have in mind that these children had been together with the mothers almost every single moment since they were born. Their mother was not only their primary caregiver, but in fact their only source of safety, their only attachment person. And most of these children were so young when they were repatriated, so they only remember the time in the camps. So before coming to Sweden, all they knew was like white tents and sand, basically. They had never slept in a real bed. They'd never seen running water from a tap. They never sat in a vehicle. So everything was new to them coming back to Sweden. And as they were thrust into this new reality, their only source of safety was taken from them. And it was truly a crisis-like experience for many of these children who already had been through so many traumatic events already in their short life. But after some time, after professional assessments, the children were subsequently reunited with their mothers. And today, it's going well for these families. It's going well for the orphans, those 7 that we brought home in 2019, and for the other children who has returned together with their mothers. Obviously, these families, including the kids, have a baggage to carry. There are challenges, of course, but all kids are in school, they have hobbies, they do sports and arts and stuff, they have friends, they're curious, they learn, and they are catching up on things that they missed out on in their early childhood because they have been given a new chance in life. And for those kids who returned with a mother, their mothers are either in university or they're working full-time supporting their children. And I would like to say that the mothers have played a crucial role for the recovery of the children. The mothers and the extended family members, such as grandparents, aunts, uncles, and in those cases of orphaned foster place children, the foster families have played a crucial role in the recovery and well-being of these children. And I just wish that I could show them for the world to see. And as for RTC, we are committed to promoting the dignity, safety, and long-term well-being of children affected by conflict and detention. We advocate for a knowledge-based decision-making where humanitarian principles, the rule of law, and global security align. Our commitment is to the compliance of children's rights. Our aim is to, if even in the smallest of ways, to contribute to the upholding of children's rights, because a lot of crazy things are happening in the world right now, where rights are being violated, children's rights are being violated left, right, and center. And I believe that we have to be more focused to stand up for these rights than ever. And I think that after what Patricio, Gorki, and I experienced in the rescue operation of the 7 orphans, it was a life-changing experience. And I think when you find yourself in such a situation that affects you so deeply, and you see the needs, and you find yourself in a situation where you can actually do something, then you have to do it. If you are in a situation where you can do something, you have to do it. And now 6+ years have passed. And together with our colleagues in RTC Denmark, we have been supporting hundreds of individuals from around 25 countries stranded in Al-Hol and Roj camps in Northeast Syria in their cases to be repatriated to their countries of origin. And the work is ongoing. So what we can conclude with after these 6, almost 7 years is, and I'm going to quote Joe Becker from Human Rights Watch here, "The real risk is not bringing these children home. It's leaving them in the camps where they risk death, illness, and recruitment." End of quote. So let's act as if children's rights applies to all kids. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Beatrice, for this very, very powerful testimony. I really find your work inspiring, truly inspiring. And we have mentioned the power of art. I would say also, I would dare saying also the power of our common humanity. When I heard you saying that you were getting calls from many different people and inspired by the experience of Patricio, and then colleagues in Denmark also start acting based on your experience. So it is truly inspiring. Thank you. Let me now turn to our next speaker, and we shift gears to look at the situation of children repatriated to Belgium. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Gerrit Lutz. Gerrit is a child and family therapist and university professor in Brussels. His research and clinical work have focused extensively on children impacted by war, migration, and social exclusion. Gerrit, thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and we are truly delighted to have you with us. My question to you is, could you briefly describe your research on Belgian children and their mothers repatriated from Northeast Syria, and highlight in particular what you have learned about the effects of separating these children from their mothers at the point of return, as we have heard already from Beatrice, that is a huge challenge. Over to you, Gerrit.
Yes, hello to everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me on this meeting, and thank you very much to the previous speakers for all their information. About Belgium, 25 Belgian women and 57 children were registered in the Kurdish detention camps. When we went to Syria in October 2018 and June 2019, we met 41 Belgian children and 14 women. About 80% of the children were younger than 6 years old, so the majority were babies, toddlers, and young preschoolers. Because of the dominant political and public discourse that framed the women and their children as dangerous terrorists, criminals, and enemies of our society, it took more than 3 years before the government started to repatriate them. Several of them already came back to Belgium on their own, but the majority was repatriated in 2021 and 2022. In total, 20 women and 49 children returned to Belgium. So 8 children and 5 women are still in Camp Al-Hol. From the moment they returned till now, we have followed 16 women and their 35 children within the framework of research, a research project initially based on geographical life storytelling and other visual narrative and art-based methods, with the aim to study their integration process from their perspective. However, the dehumanization, the suffering, the social injustice faced by most of the women and children upon their return to Belgium compelled us to abandon the initial research proposal, which was based on a design in which we as researchers positioned ourselves as outsiders, facilitating but maintaining a sufficient distance and neutrality in our research. But that changed dramatically. We took the ethical decision to abandon the original research proposal and opted to develop a research methodology which we called radical action and relational action research, being inspired by the essentials of community-based action research, social constructionism and collaborative research, and most importantly, from the perspective based on relational ethics. Relational ethics according to the work of the French philosopher Emmanuel Levinas. So that means that as researchers, we became part of our own research in order to actively support women and children in changing their dehumanizing living conditions. The women and children and their families were no longer research participants providing data about their reintegration from their perspective. They became co-researchers with whom we actively worked to make their reintegration into the Belgian society as fluent and as human as possible. Through engaging ourselves in the daily experiences and the everyday lives of these women and children, in walking together with them a very tough journey in trying to integrate in the Belgian society. Last week, we finished our research project, presenting our experiences in a report that we made together with the 16 women who were our co-authors of the report. From the start on, our government tried to separate mothers and children. From 2019 till 2021, they tried to convince the Kurdish authorities and also the Belgian mothers to only repatriate the children, separating them from their mothers. So, when children and mothers came back, they were immediately separated when they left the plane. The mothers were handcuffed and blindfolded and brought to prisons, while the children were brought to the hospital and afterwards went into foster care or child institutions. Let me read you a small piece of one of the mothers. When I left the plane, my youngest son sleeping in my arms and my eldest son holding by my other hand. I saw soldiers in combat dresses all around. I thought, is this real? We are only 6 women and 10 children. A policeman came and told me that he was going to take my children. We just landed, coming back after 7 years, and they tell you that they are taking your children away. I started to cry. My eldest son started to cry. Louder and louder. A man took him away. He started to kicking and hitting and shouting that he wanted to stay with me, with his mom. Another person took my youngest son, who was still sleeping. I quickly gave him a farewell kiss before I was handcuffed. So the little boy of 4 years old woke up in the arms of a foreigner in a country he didn't know, where they were speaking a language he didn't understand. So this boy, after months, was still not able to fall asleep, afraid that he would be left alone after waking up. So I continue. The first physical contacts of these young children were 1 to 4 months after return. A lot of children didn't know where their mothers were for months. The mean distance between where the children were living and the prisons the mothers were was 76 kilometers. For some of them, 183 kilometers. So impossible to visit their mothers in the prison. They got weekly video calls of about 10 to 20 minutes, and once a month, there was a visit of 1 hour in the prison. Also, after leaving the prison, the childcare services slowed down the contacts and the reunification of mothers and children. And I have a few slides to show you, 3 slides to show you very quickly, if that is possible. I'm going to show.
I don't know whether it's possible. Kat, is that feasible?
Yeah, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So I want to show on these slides the number of months that the mothers were in prison. And you can see the 16 mothers that worked with us. And you can see that there is a big difference in time that they were in prison, although they were all sentenced for the same facts. But more important is what happened after they left the prison. And that is the time in number of months between leaving the prison and being reunified with their children. So you can see that some of them immediately were living again with their mothers. But on the other hand, other ones were for more than 26, more than 4 years, one of them, more than 1 year, not yet reunited by their children. So the children were still in child institutions, youth institutions, or in foster care with families, and only their mothers could visit them a few times a week outside of the homes, or could have video calls. Yeah, for another number of months or years after they left the prison, after the sentences were finished. So what is the effect on children in these situations? I don't have to explain you on the psychosocial development, emotional development of the children, what the impact was. But I want to show you some slides resulting from the research we were doing. The first one is, wait, I'm gonna put it in this way. Yeah. The first one is this one, a geographical life story telling of a 5-year-old boy. He was designing the places where he used to be. So this place is, of course, Camp Al Roche. And he was pointing the most important, the tent he was living in, together with his mother, the cat, himself. And he was pointing to the playground. He was pointing to a small shop, and sometimes they were selling their sweets for him. And he was pointing to another playground with other children. So important, and that's for other children, that from the camps, they talk mostly about the good memories they had in the camps, not about the bad things that happened. I think that's a kind of protecting themselves. But most importantly, when we were speaking about how he wants to live now, he just copied the tent into a house where they would be living, an apartment, together with his mother and with the cat. And this boy often said he would like to return to the camp because then he could be together with his mother and his friends there. So his connection to the camps by being separating, missing the social connections to his mother, but also to other ones who were important for him there, yes, was a very important theme in that boy's life after coming back. Another example that I want to give you, yes, maybe this small one I may not forget, when he got a gift, a small gift, a llama, then he made a house for the llama to sleep. And you can see he made a tent for the llama to sleep. So he was still living by the situation he was in of being separated, still longing to live the places he came from together with his mother. And another one I want to show you is from a 9-year-old girl who was living in a youth institution, and her mother left prison. She called the girl to say, "I'm free, I left the prison," and the child asked, "When I will be free?" So she was designing the institution as her prison of being separated. And when we asked, and she was designing this one, and she was designing this one because that was the place where the mother stayed after leaving the prison. Yes. And when we asked her where she would like to stay, of course, a big house, together, each one has his room, her sister, her mother, and herself, and with horses, with a swimming pool, and so on. So that was the dream she had for the future. So when she said, "When I will be free," yes, it was 11 months later that the mother who left the prison got lived together with her daughter. So this kind of things were, and I'm going to come back. This kind of things that were very important in what happened in Belgium. And to conclude, one of the most frightening findings of our research was the destructive power of polarizing enemy discourses on society, policymakers, judicial institutions, youth care system, and mental health educational systems. Yes, also youth care systems and mental health educational systems. They caused a lot of suffering, pain, and additional traumatization of the mothers and these children. The strong existing bond between mothers and children, which was already discussed, was not used as a powerful resource of fluent and human reintegration, but rather as an instrument to continue punishing mothers and their children, even after completing the sentences. And okay, I know my 10 minutes are nearly over, so if there are questions about what it did on the children, I'm very pleased to speak about that too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gerrit, for sharing these insights, and I'm sure that many of us on this call look forward to reading your research report. Can you give us an indication of when it may be available?
I think in December it will be published.
Excellent. Thank you again. Let me now turn to our last distinguished speaker, Dr. Lynn Schneider. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is a lecturer of sociology at Oxford University. She has conducted extensive research on the experiences and support needs of children in families with affiliations to extremist groups or terrorist designated groups and organizations. Lynn, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. You have also done extensive research on this topic, so here is my question. Could you briefly describe your current research project and some of the main findings so far, and in particular, some of the key factors that contribute to effective children's reintegration into their communities? Over to you, Lynn.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me, and also thanks for the question. So maybe just a little bit about my research. I've been working on child returnees, but also children in families affiliated with right-wing extremism and other forms of extremism for almost 4 years now. So across 2 research projects. The first one was called Prepare and was funded by the European Commission. And the second one, which is what I'm leading right now, is called Persist, and it's funded by the German government. And the reason why I started this work was because most of the existing research at that time on children of ISIS members almost exclusively focused on their experiences abroad and on the indoctrination, and especially on their involvement as child soldiers. So I wanted to really better understand how parental affiliation with ISIS shapes children's lives beyond possible indoctrination, and also what life after repatriation actually means for these children's development. So over the last years, I've done quite a lot of, I think we're now at up to 45 interviews with a variety of different practitioners. Some of them are here today. So they do include psychologists, educators, youth protection services, social workers, civil society and organizations, NGOs, legal experts, and also in Germany, returnee coordinators. And also with the support from Repatriate the Children, we've been able to include the voices of mothers, extended family members, and guardians too. I know I'm trying to keep it as comparative as possible. A lot of my research, especially on policy and practical responses, focuses on Germany. But because I looked at the situation and the developmental outcomes of children in Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, a little bit, and mostly Kosovo too, I'll try to keep things as comparative as possible. And then I try to highlight some key factors for successful integration of children and mothers that I think will be very relevant across countries. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about. I'll try to narrow it down to sort of 3 key findings. And the first one that's really important still to emphasize is that child returnees are an extremely diverse demographic. So we've heard before, a lot of them are quite young. There are boys and girls in there, and there's not a single type of returnee family. So the problems that they face and the support that they need can also vary quite widely, and the needs can also shift significantly over time. The second thing is that we do tend to overemphasize what children experience abroad, and much of that we can't even reconstruct. But what happens to them after repatriation, how they're treated, where they're living, and who they're interacting with is equally important for their mental health and for their long-term well-being and reintegration. And the third thing is what has come across quite a lot already, that the situation of mothers and children are really closely interlinked. So their integration and rehabilitation can't be seen as 2 separate issues. So I'll try to unpack this a little bit, starting with the point of diversity. Actually, much about what governments and practitioners and academics knew about children's lives in ISIS actually came from ISIS propaganda. So that was images of indoctrinated boys undergoing weapon training. But ISIS never really showed us family life. They didn't show us the experiences of girls, of young boys who were never really part of any kind of formal indoctrination structures. And what we found in this research is that children were exposed to traumatic events or extreme ideology to very different degrees. So there are some who were taken abroad, some others were born there. Some parents did actively expose their children to extremist violence, but then a lot also actively tried to do everything in their power to shield them from any kind of negative experiences or insecurities. And it's that diversity that really also explains why none of the child returnees that have come across my research ever raised any concerns about radicalization, neither when they arrived or at a later stage. And it also explains why some were really deeply traumatized when they arrived, and others initially were coping quite well and were actually considering the circumstances pretty healthy and psychologically stable. And that also means there are several important implications, not only for my research, but in general, how to deal with these children. And the first one is that a child who doesn't show signs of radicalization, who doesn't pose a problem, might still have support needs and might still feel some problems. And the second is also that a child who shows problems does not automatically represent a security threat. And in Germany and Sweden, I paradoxically actually found that support for children is often easier to secure when it is framed as a radicalization prevention, even though radicalization doesn't really play a role. And on the one hand, that kind of securitization and the fact that everybody was so scared of the caps of the caliphate meant that there were resources available for them that weren't there for other children who might have had similar needs or traumas, experienced war and so on, that were not considered a potential security risk. But on the other hand, that also risked being unfairly labeled as risky, and it also did obscure the actual issues that some of them really needed help with. And then also finally, and I really can't emphasize this enough, is that the children's well-being depends just as much on their living environment and their relationships at home and the stability of their care arrangements as it does on what they had experienced abroad. So we did see, and I think Gerrit and Beatrice might be able to confirm that, is that some of the children did face quite a lot of trauma, had developmental delays or health challenges that can be directly linked to their time in Syria and Iraq, but also how they developed and how other children who didn't show these kind of issues, how they developed in the long term did depend a lot on what they experienced and what kind of support they get after repatriation. And even though they don't live in mortal danger anymore, a lot of them really face a lot of instabilities. And yeah, as it has been mentioned, is the major factor, or one of the major factors for children whose parents or whose mothers were still alive, was the separation. And unlike in Sweden and Belgium, Germany did not automatically separate all mothers and children upon return, also especially in earlier repatriations before 2019. But when mothers were prosecuted, the separation did become inevitable because they were placed in prison. But how that very separation has been managed did have really enormous consequences for children. So in Sweden, for example, mothers were often treated by default as an inherent threat to their children, and there was very little case-by-case assessment. So that did mean that all these children who had really positive and strong attachments from their mother were suddenly cut off them, and that was really traumatic. And again, also confirmed that for some cases, that separation from the mother was experienced as more traumatic for the children as anything else that they had experienced in the conflict zone. In Germany, it was a bit more nuanced. So every federal state in Germany is like its own kingdom. So there are a variety of different approaches to it. But one federal state restricted contact of incarcerated mothers to their children only if they had been convicted of child neglect and when the child had returned as severely traumatized, and this could have been linked, or this would be able to be linked to the interaction with the parents. But also overall, Germany and Sweden did share some major similarities, because even in other cases and even in pre-trial detentions, mothers often went a month without seeing the children. And in Germany, it's technically possible to stay in prison with your mother up to the age of 6, but there are not really a lot of appropriate facilities. And the key takeaway of that management of imprisoned mothers is basically that child reintegration efforts should draw less on experiences from child soldier rehabilitation and de-radicalization, and more from good practice around safeguarding and the best interest of the child during maternal imprisonment and custody decisions. So in my research, I came across cases where children were both very vocal about really wanting or also not wanting to live and to be in contact with their mothers. So these children's own views, whether they want contact or not, do need to be taken seriously in all of these matters. And when it comes to rehabilitative and support measures, it's also really important to take into account that the needs of children and mothers are interlinked. So some children might independently need therapy, educational support, mentorship, whatever that is. But these measures alone aren't really sufficient. They're most effective when the needs of the mothers are also addressed simultaneously. So in a way, supporting mothers to find a new job and stabilize their lives or address their own traumas can be seen as a direct support measure for children too. So again, policy and practices that are sensitive to the best interest of the child will be crucial to ensure both the reintegration of mothers and also of their children. And this is something that I also really saw in my research, is how mothers are treated really affect their children. So if practitioners or foster parents or even extended family members are hostile towards the mother, children do experience shame, loyalty conflicts, and also distrust, and that can really worsen more when the mothers also perceive their detention and separation and treatment as unjust and communicate that with their children. And also, if mothers don't trust the ones that could offer support, they are less likely to accept help for their children when they actually really need it. So that means that there are basically 3 areas, and I think that applies really across every country, that really need attention to ensure a positive reintegration. So first, training, especially for social services and frontline practitioners, is important. They need help to address their own biases and avoid assumptions, especially that all mothers present the same level or type of risk to their children or to society. And second is that extended families play a crucial role. We've seen that in the documentary. Anne has highlighted that too. And also in a lot of my research, we saw that relatives often facilitated the return and also became guardians. And we also saw that these families often really face a lot of challenges themselves. So caring responsibilities can be overwhelming for grandparents, and there are a lot of family conflicts. So that can be between maternal and paternal families. They sometimes blame each other for their own children's departure to ISIS and who had radicalized whom. And then also mothers had difficult relationships with their own families and parents often before they traveled. And that can also complicate the reintegration then when the children are being taken care of in that family. So these families often really need some kind of mediation to rebuild relationships or to manage tensions and to provide a stable environment for the children. And then the third thing is that mothers often struggle to articulate or understand their role in ISIS and how their ideology had impacted the lives of their children. And again, there were a lot of mothers who were really amazing in protecting their children once they were there. But coming to terms with their own involvement with the group can be really hard for them. And they might also be very afraid to discuss this with their children or with their family members because they're really scared that this will damage the relationship between them and their children, which is mostly like everything that they have. But avoiding these conversations can also lead children to think either that their mother's detention or their family's concerns are entirely unfair. That can increase insecurity and mistrust. We also saw that mothers needed support to come to terms with the past, not only their extended families and their children, but also mothers themselves to help them navigate and develop a sort of narrative that is helpful for them in the future. And as we've seen in the documentary, there are a lot of questions around how children will manage their parents' past as they get older. And that's also been raised in the documentary. So I see Isabella is here. I'm just going to quickly say one important thing that I think is relevant. Civil society organizations can play a really important role in helping these families to build a sort of long-term trust and so on. And in Germany, I think this is one of the things that worked quite well. It's because the German government has funded organizations like Pro Kids and Grüner Vogel, who do provide support for children and for mothers. And it works because they're able to build trust over time and they're not the security apparatus of the state. So yeah, basically these are the kind of things that are really important is in any kind of intervention, whether necessary, legally necessary, and so on, prioritizing the best interest of the child and really having an audit trail on how these considerations were taken into account can make a big change. And then also connecting different agencies, the right ones together. So having civil society, education, child welfare, and so on, all on one table can really prevent some kind of premature biased activities that are there to punish parents or a sort of misguided understanding of what child protection means. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Lynn. And I could, and I'm sure other will be the same for others. I could listen to you for much longer, but I have this unpleasant role of keeping us on track with the time. But thanks so much for these insights, and I particularly liked your point around the fact that we shouldn't look at this caseload as a monolithic group, that there are really huge differences in the experiences that they have gone through, and so the needs and the response would need to differ. Thank you so much, and one can only hope that future policy decisions concerning these children and their mothers will be informed more by the evidence generated through studies like yours and the research that Gerrit was presenting to us earlier. So thank you once again. Let me now open the floor for questions. You may write them on the Q&A box, or just raise your hand, and you may want to address your questions to specific panelists, or just share your insights on something that perhaps has stood out or for you, or challenge your thinking. I can see that there are actually already 3 questions in the box. So maybe let me go through the first one, which is for you, Anne. So a question, you may have read it already. So would you like to answer that first?
Yes. The question relates to the fact that the European Court of Human Rights decision, also against France, actually was different as to whether or not the jurisdiction question could be said to require France to act to assist the children in the camps in Northeast Syria. Well, actually, the committee's decision was handed down in February 2022, and the European Court of Human Rights decision in September 2022. So the Committee on the Rights of the Child, we knew that the cases were in the pipeline at the same time. So it was a little bit of like who would issue their decision first, and it was the committee that issued their decision first. So we didn't have to be concerning ourselves about what the European Court of Human Rights has said. But since then, the committee had a case against Finland, in which it made the same decision that it had made earlier, based on the same principles. So I would say in that case that the committee is continuing along its own line, following its own jurisprudence rather than following the jurisprudence of the European Court of Human Rights. The European Court of Human Rights did reference the decision of the Committee on the Rights of the Child, but ultimately decided that there isn't a general right to repatriation, but found that France needed to look at how they were interpreting children's right to re-enter their country. But I think it still fell quite short of what was really needed. And the question also asks, so what's the way forward? And I can say from the Committee on the Rights of the Child, on my last day as chair, the last letter that I signed, well, actually, there were many letters that I signed, but on the same topic was the committee decided to send letters to every country that has children in the camps in Northeast Syria, asking them to redouble their efforts and remove any obstacles to ensure the repatriation of the children, but also proper measures be taken for their reintegration at the country level, and asked states to report to the committee on a case about their own situation, how far they were with this process. Now, actually, these kinds of letters that the committee writes are usually dealt with confidentially. So we may not get to see all of the answers that the states will make to the Committee on the Rights of the Child, but I made a decision to make it public that question had been asked, because I think it's important, and I think that at the state level, civil society organizations, for example, could ask those states, have you responded to the letter from the Committee on the Rights of the Child, and how far have you got with your process? So it's not strong enough, but it is at least something towards trying to keep this alive as an issue, and to make sure that we're not waiting for individuals or grandparents to act and bring cases, but the committee was taking a proactive step to call states to account and to ask them what steps they are taking.
Thank you, Anne. I can see that there is one question for Lynn about whether you will be publishing your interim findings anytime soon, as this may inform the work of NGOs such as Reprieve, who are engaged in strategic litigation regarding children in Northeast Syria.
Yeah, it's something I think about a lot. I'm sitting on a lot of data, but also because it's quite sensitive, and because it's also such a small group of people that I always have to take care that I want to explain everything in nuance, but it can't be so nuanced that these families can be identified. And there's a lot of complexity around it. Some of the issues that around the security or the situation of the mothers, and there are also some cases where there might be some ongoing investigations of child endangerment and so on. So I'm right now just thinking about the best ways of ethically writing it up, and I'm quite happy actually that there's not so much public attention to that issue, so that my findings can't be taken out of context and end up in a headline at the Daily Mail or something. So yeah, that's currently the consideration. Joanna Cook and she was doing my first research project with me together. We have a book coming out next year with Columbia University Press. So hopefully some of the more, and I always call my findings preliminary findings. I don't think they will be ever anything else, but hopefully the first sort of findings will be published by mid next year. Yeah.
Thank you, Lynn. Let me check. I think there is one more question. I'm wondering if Patricio did try to get custody of his grandchildren, or if efforts were taken to keep the siblings together. So maybe Beatrice, you may be able to answer that question, or Gorki.
Yes,
I think Beatrice is yeah, you take it, please.
Thank you so much. So we cannot go into many details about the situation, but what has happened is that there is collaboration between the social services and child protection unit and those who are around the children. It's been important to build a social network around these orphans who already lost their parents, and to keep networks between them ongoing, for them to know that they are one family, they are siblings. Not all 7 children live together. They are placed in different foster families, but there are routines for them to meet up every now and then. Things are not always smooth when many people are involved, but the best interest of the child is the guidance that everyone has to adhere to. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice.
I can add that from a storytelling perspective, Patricio wanted, but he realized very soon, I mean, the first days of the arrival of the children, that it was even one child. He actually said it, each child needs for very much attention. So he would have wanted to take care of but he was never eligible in a juridic term, I would believe. So, and he knew that shortly after coming, but while this was happening, he was living under the idea that everything was better than the situation they were in, these children. So he was prepared to do whatever it was necessary, as many of the other relatives. But according to the law in Sweden, what's best for the child is up to the state to decide. It's not the obligation of the grandparents or the kin of that child, and there is no obligation towards them either. So yeah. So what's best for the child? Yeah.
Thank you, Gorki, for these additional points. Let me see if anyone would like to come in, either in writing or raising your hand.
I have a little question, Isabella, while others prepare.
Sure, please.
Maybe for Lynn or for everyone, if there has been any particular differences between boys and girls regarding the way they reintegrate, and about teenagers who return, if there's any specific points you would like to raise. And then more of a political question, which I don't know if someone can answer. With the fall of the Assad regime, what is the situation in the camp and the repatriations, whether they're increasing or they got stalled, or what's the situation?
Thank you, Danielle. I think the first question is for Lynn.
Yeah, well, the gender question, I'm always asking myself that in the data, but because it's a qualitative research project and every child has such a different background, it's kind of hard to say how much gender makes an impact. My impression is, though, from the cases that I know, that the children with the sort of strongest, longer lasting traumas or challenges have been boys who had been exposed to quite a lot of violence back then, who also then struggled with a lot of support, still struggled to overcome some of these traumas. So I do think, and we know that, is that there was a very sort of gender-based violence towards younger boys. They were not as confined to the home environments. They often had to play a bigger role in getting out of the house, doing things. So I can imagine also when we think about repatriating children now, a lot of the children in Germany have been repatriated for a very long time now. So if we're thinking about the ones who are still there, I could definitely imagine that those who are not confined to the security of the tents, but take more active roles, might have also experienced more stressful things, might be considered more dangerous too, so the societal responses might be different. On the other hand, we had a lot of young boys who did really well after some time too. So yeah, maybe Beatrice, you have a different perspective on that. Yeah, anyone else who's in direct contact with the children. Gerrit, maybe.
I think looking at the age difference, this is an indicator of recovery and reintegration, because most of the kids of third country nationals were born in Syria, which means they were around like 7 years old maximum when the so-called caliphate fell. So the vast majority of all children in the camps are super young, and many of them coming back to Sweden, for example, they don't know that they have been in a war zone. They don't know what is terrorism. They haven't heard the word ISIS. They didn't realize that in the camp they were actually locked in, that they were detained. But many of them actually have fragments of sometimes positive memories, like, oh, do you remember when I had my birthday and I got that juice package? Or do you remember that kitten that came to our tent? Like these kind of memories, which is very interesting. While other kids who were possibly brought from Sweden or other countries, brought to Syria, and they were older, they have, of course, a much higher level of awareness of what they were going through. They have more traumatic experiences that have more negative consequences for them. They remember stuff from the war and ISIS time as well. And of course, that affects also the situation when they come back and recover. And this means that time is of the essence when it comes to the repatriation work. The sooner kids can be brought home, the easier and better their reintegration and rehabilitation process will go. And I can also say something on the second question. So it's the Autonomous Administration of Northeast Syria, the Kurd-led local self-announced administration, that are holding these families in Al-Hol and Roj camp. It was never the Assad regime. The regime did not have control over this geographical area and these prisoners. However, the Kurds in Northeast Syria holding the local administration there, they don't want to hold these third country nationals there. Since 2019, over and over, they have been appealing to the international community to come and get their citizens back. So the children are locked in, but they could be free if the countries of their origins asked for them and contributed and enabled their return. Since March 10th, there has been a political negotiation between the Kurd-led self-administration and their military force, Syrian Democratic Forces, and the new government of Syria on how to merge and how to deal with issues. And as for now, it's still an ongoing negotiation. But regardless, what is needed is political will from the countries of responsible states of these families. We have seen around 40 countries repatriating some or many of their citizens already. So we know that it's possible and it's necessary, and it needs to be done now. Yeah. Thank you.
Can I add one thing to this, because I think it's really important? It is the will of the countries, but one thing that we have seen in Germany too is that you can only repatriate mothers and children if the mothers agree to be repatriated. And because the security situation is also very, very sensitive there, going on and saying, okay, I want to come back. Maybe some of them don't, but even if they do, if they're living in a really dangerous environment, even declaring that they want to leave and providing protection between the time that it has become clear to everyone else around them that they want to leave and then actually leaving has to be organized quite sensitively, because we assume that there's a quite strong self-selection or censorship bias in these mothers to say, we want to stay here, we don't want to go back. Which also means that the children can't be taken. So it's not only because Germany is open to taking children back, but sometimes that is a big barrier. And I don't know if that's also the case with Sweden or Denmark.
Well, I can see that there are more questions coming. We will have to wrap up very soon. So allow me to take just the last two questions, and if you can be telegraphic in your response. So the first one is for Gerrit, and it's around the polarization of the enemy discourse in Belgium. And if you can share your thoughts on how could government ensure that these children will not be traumatized a second time following their return.
Yes, I just wanted to say something about the previous question on the gender difference. Because what we saw in the stories we made with the children, and one of the activities we did about this was making animation films about the first years of their life. And there's a difference between boys and girls in the interest for the fathers. Boys are very involved in their fathers and trying to find out who was my father. And that's something we see with the younger boys. And now some of them are 9, 10 years old, and on the internet they are looking to information about their fathers. So there is a difference in that way. That the father figure is a bigger concern or a broader theme for boys than for girls, which is not easy. Because the fathers are, surely I speak for Belgium, of course, but are kind of a taboo, yes? And these children do feel that too, yes? And their interest for the fathers is growing when they become older. About the polarization, I think a positive thing in that way is that the women who came back to Belgium and their children, and it's already said also by Lynn, yes, radicalization is not a team in the stories and the lives of these women. They came back to have a normal life and to have a normal life for their children, to give their children chances to build up their lives in the society. A lot of women who came back were already radicalized by being in Syria. Yes, by being under the regime of ISIS. So there was a lot of activities and efforts to invest into de-radicalization, but this was not necessary. This was not the theme of coming back. And for them, of course, the theme was not to be as quick as possible and together with their children and to build out their lives. So, and that's what they did. So all the mothers that came back, of the 20 ones that came back, it has been proven now after all these years, because also them, they went to study they went to work, they build out their lives, that all the ones who were afraid of them and who were, let's say, shouting out that it would be a very big, and argumenting that it would be a very big danger to bring them back, were wrong. And that is realized. This was not the case. So in that way, this has a positive effect on the repatriations, already the last ones. Yeah, so it became easier to repatriate, and this, you could see it on the slide, but I didn't point to it. But the ones who came in later got less months of prison as a sentence, yes, and could leave the prisons much easier and earlier. So there was a, let's say, a shift in the discourse created by the mothers themselves, by showing them as being humans, mothers who wants to raise their children. Things changed. Nevertheless, there are still 5 of them in the camps, not yet repatriated, but I think it's not a topic anymore. The first one that came back, it were big debates. There was a very much resistance against them. And the last one, it became a casual thing in the news, even it was not mentioned anymore. So in that way, the polarization in that way for a majority of our people, Belgian people, and changed. But of course, the really left-wing parties and so on, they keep on, of course, to polarize and to keep saying, to point to the danger, the terrorism, the criminality, and all these kind of things. But it were the mothers that showed that this was a mistake, this was wrong in their cases. And that's the fact, that's because we were stigmatizing a group of people, not making differences by case, and what needed to be done. And what is, of course, very typical for polarizing discourses and ideologies, that they are stigmatizing people as a group, yes? And in this way, it started to change in seeing these people, how they're building out their lives.
Thank you, Gerrit. Maybe there are more questions coming in, but let me take a last one, which is the following. One of the participants is asking whether any of you has come across information on the situation of children who have aged out whilst living in Northeast Syria. I believe Beatrice maybe had mentioned something earlier, but whomever would like to answer this question, please go
ahead. Not many, but some children that were captured by the Syrian Democratic Forces after the fall of the so-called caliphate were put in so-called youth rehabilitation centers because they were teenage boys, while other children who were a bit younger has become teenage boys during their time in Al-Hol and Rosh camp, and subsequently many of them have been brought to these so-called youth rehabilitation centers. The very small number of boys that were put there, most of them are now adults, which means that there's a reluctance, even bigger reluctance, we analyze from their responsible states to bring them home, because it's much more taboo to bring an adult male back rather than a child. But we want to emphasize that these young adult boys, young men, are victims of terrorism, and they were children by the time that they were exposed to this crime, and they should be treated such as. And I'm also leaving the floor to Anne to continue there. If you want to say something else, Skelton, please.
Yes, I agree with all of what you said. And in addition to that, though, some of the children who are currently living with their mothers, when they reach the age of 12, are at times being separated out and sent to these youth rehabilitation centers. So that is such an opportunity missed. because obviously it's so important. It just really reminds us of the urgency to try at least to make sure that all the children who are still below the age of 12 should be brought home, because this is the chances of reintegration are better, obviously, and also just to save the children that trauma, the boys, of being separated from their mothers.
I have a question for the panel, Isabella. Is there time?
Just a couple of minutes. So if you could go ahead very fast, please, Gorki.
Well, since the topic is art and children's rights, I wonder if, because we have been approached in different times of this long process by fiction makers and talking about making a, the discussion was whether someone wanted to make a remake of this fiction, but and I see a possibility of making fiction because of the impact, let's say, adolescents have had on when it comes to the responsibility of the parents and the how children act in different situations, and the criminalizing of young children, whether they should be penalized. Here in Sweden, we have right now, I am participating in a project where children of, the current government want to criminalize 13-year-old children and want to put them in prison. That is one of the propositions that they have. But the question is, do you see a TV series, for example, talking about this topic, repatriating the children in Europe, or European TV series, or maybe Netflix, I don't know, but what do you see in front of you?
Thank you, Gorki. I don't know to whom the question is addressed. Was it addressed to the panelists, to any of the panelists?
Panelists, definitely, yes.
Yeah. So
we don't have it in Germany. I can tell you that we don't have it. There were a couple of mothers who started engaging in documentaries. I think it's a sensitive issue for the children who've not come to terms with the past yet, because obviously they are not the ones who are addressed by these movies, but they are also the ones who are very interested in it. So it will be interesting to do one that has them as the audience in mind too. I think that
not having the audience, not having children, not even, this is for the broader European audience. Think about that adolescents, like a huge impact that TV series have had. I don't know if you are acquainted with it.
Well, I think it's an open, please, Anne, please.
Well, I was just going to say, I would like to watch it. So I think, yes, many people would be very interested in this topic, and I think it would help to humanize the story and to help people understand it better. This is, I think there are very good examples of films that have, and series that have done that. And I think there would be an appetite among people to watch something like that.
Thank you, Anne.
It creates an impact and a discussion. That is what I've seen around the work that was maybe not even the intention with adolescents, but a lot of people and in society, they don't even work with cinema or not even with human rights. And that is the point of making art, that it entangles with human rights, is to create ripples in the water that neither you or we filmmakers are in control of.
Yeah, and here is another project for you, Gorki. I hope that you will pick up the challenge and start working on the next project to talk about this issue and other human rights issues. And I think it's great that we are concluding this conversation today by closing the loop on the connection between art and human rights, which is what has driven us into this initiative. And we really believe that using art is a great way, in whichever form, cinema and other forms, is a great way to spark conversations around complex issues. So with that, I thank you very, very much, all our wonderful speakers, and also everyone who has tuned in and contributed to this conversation. And I don't know whether Carla is still online, otherwise I will hand over to Kat for a few closing remarks on behalf of Essex University. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Isabella. And I am still online. I'd love to thank Gorki for your beautiful, beautiful film that's inspired all of us. And it's inspired our work, but it's inspired this whole conversation that we've been having today. And I'd like to really thank Isabella and Daniela for this great initiative, which is just getting started, and we'll see where it takes us next. But stay tuned, everyone. For
the audience visiting this conversation, it will be available also. But is it upon request, or will you send it? The link?
We will be in touch with those who registered for this event with the film link. So everyone will be able to see it. So it's a great opportunity. And thank you, Gorki, for your generosity with respect to doing that. I think it's a great opportunity for everyone to see this really wonderful film. So we'll let everyone know about future initiatives that we have with respect to human rights and art. And on World Children's Day, I think there's a lot of pause for reflection on what further work needs to be done, how much work there is to be done. And I hope we all remain energized and up to the task for all the work that needs to be done on children's rights. So thank you, everyone, and wishing everyone a good rest of their day.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.